On this Wednesday night, Quebec's premier quits. Why François Legault says now is the time to step down.
Politics is an extreme sport.
And what this might mean for Quebec's separatist movement. Another emergency for an Ontario First Nation.
We've been evacuated yearly.
The sewage flooding homes and the push for more federal help. It's not easy being Greenland, the territory's latest attempts to end the U.S. president's takeover threats. Plus, no fights on flights, please. The push to improve air travel etiquette.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. A big political change is happening in Quebec. Premier François Legault, who at one point was the most popular premier in Canada, is resigning. He's walking away as leader of the party he created after winning back-to-back majorities. After 7 years in power, his star has fallen, and Legault says he's leaving for the good of the party. Mike Armstrong explains why he's leaving now and where it leaves the province. Mike.
Well, Don, it's not that often that a politician can pull off a complete surprise, but François Legault did that this morning. Quebec's premier didn't have anything on his agenda today until a speech was added suddenly. He'd be speaking at the National Assembly at 11 a.m. about something. It turned out to be a goodbye. Legault says there is in Quebec a hope for change and a new premier. For the good of his party and the province, he says he's leaving.
François Legault, like Justin Trudeau almost exactly a year ago, waited a very long time to resign despite very, very bad polling numbers.
Winning took work for Legault. He created his own party and ran in 8 elections before leading his CAQ to victory in October of 2018. Legault was originally in business. He was one of the founders of Air Transat. In his first stint in politics, he was a minister with the separatist Parti Québécois. The party he created for his second stint was meant as an option for nationalists fed up with the sovereignty debate.
If people want Quebec to flourish within Canada, they now have an alternative.
Now, Legault would lead the province through major crises, most the sort premiers before him had seen.
Vaccines are our best hope.
Then came the pandemic. Legault brought in arguably the most severe restrictions in North America, including curfews, and yet increased his support. He had an approval rating for more than a year, higher than 80%.
The way he handled the crisis was really hailed by almost everybody, including his opponents.
Recent years have been difficult. There were failed investments that cost the province hundreds of millions, a management scandal around a government project that went $500 million over budget, and a bitter battle with doctors over a new pay system. From polling a few years ago as high as any premier ever, François Legault's party has now dropped all the way to 4th. Legault says he'll stay on until a new leader is chosen, but this now means that both the governing party in Quebec and the official opposition are having leadership races at the same time in an election year. Quebecers are supposed to go to the polls this October. Donna?
And Mike, the separatist Parti Québécois is leading in opinion polls right now, and it's promised to hold another referendum on independence if it wins the next election. Is this resignation a gift to them?
It could be, Donna, no question, but there's also a bit of watch what you wish for here. The Parti Québécois leader would likely much prefer to go up against an unpopular François Legault rather than the wild cards he now faces. It's hard to miss the parallels with what happened in Ottawa with the Poilievre-Trudeau situation just a year ago. Donna?
All right, Mike Armstrong in Montreal, thanks. Canada's Prime Minister has arrived in Beijing on the invitation of the Chinese president. Mark Carney hopes to reset Canada's strained relationship with China and expand trade so that Canada is less reliant on the U.S. As our chief political correspondent David Aiken reports, this trip is all about business.
It has been 8 years since a Canadian Prime Minister touched down in the capital of China, but given the way the world has changed, it seems like a century ago. In 2017, Justin Trudeau was Prime Minister and Canada and China were on cordial terms, planning to jointly celebrate the year of Canada-China tourism. Stephen Harper was in China twice and on his second visit received a gift of 2 Chinese pandas. But the world is now much changed.
This is a new government with a new prime minister, a new foreign policy, in a new geopolitical environment.
China and the U.S. are now involved in a great power struggle, and the U.S. takeover of Venezuela's oil fields has threatened Chinese energy security. Meanwhile, Canada is engaged in the most serious fracture ever in its relationship with its single biggest trading partner, the United States, and is looking for relief from its second biggest trading partner, China.
In this moment of economic stress for our country, it is necessary for us to diversify our trading partners and to grow non-U.S. trade by at least 50% over the next 10 years.
So Prime Minister Mark Carney, who did not speak to reporters upon his arrival, will stay here in Beijing. He will not visit any other city, and his itinerary has no visits to cultural, education, or scientific centers, no people-to-people events, and nothing that even hints that Canada might be concerned about China's record on human rights and democracy. Instead, it is all business. A meeting Thursday with Chinese Premier Li Qiang, a meeting Friday with President Xi Jinping, and Carney leaves Saturday. So there's no pandas, no universities, no visits to the Great Wall of China. Carney has one single focus while he's here: increase Canadian non-U.S. exports and find new investors for Canadian energy and infrastructure projects. Donna.
Okay, David Aiken in Beijing, thank you. Chinese trade is thriving despite U.S. President Donald Trump's trade war and punitive tariffs. China reported a trade surplus of $1.19 trillion in 2025, the world's largest ever trade surplus. A trade surplus exists when a nation's exports exceed its imports. Trade with the U.S. did weaken, but was made up for by a rise in Chinese exports elsewhere, especially to Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America. First Nations leaders in Northern Ontario are calling on federal and provincial governments to act faster after a remote community's water treatment plant and sewage systems failed. The fly-in community of Kashechewan declared a state of emergency earlier this month. It has no clean water source, and local leaders say living there is not safe. Jillian Piper reports.
Sewage seeping into homes for more than a week is unthinkable for most Canadian households, but it is common on the Kashechewan First Nation.
I think people are frustrated.
Tyson Wesley lives in the Northern Ontario community, which declared a state of emergency 10 days ago due to flooding, something he says has become the norm.
This is something that is a once-in-a-lifetime thing for some other communities, but our community has gone through many evacuations over the last 18 years.
Kashechewan's water plant once again flooded 2 weeks ago. 2 people have contracted E. coli, and there's no clean drinking water, prompting local leaders to come to the nation's capital and urge Ottawa to uphold its treaty obligations.
We've been evacuated yearly, sometimes twice in the year. Ontario and Canada have failed to invest in a long-term solution.
For the past 2 decades, Kashechewan leaders have been in talks with Ottawa to relocate their community away from the flood zone.
We need governments to fast-track relocation for Kashechewan. Stop relying on temporary band-aid solutions.
Nearly 700 residents have been evacuated from the fly-in community, leaving about 1,600 people behind. The nation says it is not satisfied with the pace of the efforts so far and wants more federal help.
People are still getting sick in the community because they are left there and because the evacuation is taken too slow.
Neither the federal Indigenous Services Minister or Emergency Preparedness Minister were available for an interview, but in a statement said their government is helping to accelerate daily evacuation flight capacity and restore water treatment in Kashechewan, and will work closely with the provincial government should they request additional support. Donna?
Jillian Piper in Ottawa, thanks. Denmark's foreign minister, after a meeting in Washington, says it is clear the U.S. president is still intent on conquering Greenland. The meeting failed to solve a fundamental disagreement, and now European countries, including Germany, are sending troops to Greenland as a show of support. Jackson Proskow reports on where the tense situation stands.
The tense meeting unfolded next door to the White House as Danish and Greenlandic leaders tried to tamp down President Donald Trump's talk of annexation. It doesn't seem they made any progress.
It's clear that the president has this wish of conquering over Greenland, We made it very, very clear that this is not in the interest of the kingdom.
The problem is there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland, but there's everything we can do.
Hanging over it all was a morning social media post from Trump in which he once again demanded the Danish territory. NATO becomes far more formidable and effective with Greenland in the hands of the United States, he wrote. Anything less than that is unacceptable.
And we'll see how it all works out. I think something will work out.
How important it is from our side to strengthen our cooperation with the United States, but that doesn't mean that we want to be owned by the United States.
If cooperation is on the table, Denmark and Greenland aren't taking any chances. Denmark is bolstering its military presence on the island. Allies, including Sweden, are also sending troops in solidarity. The French president told his cabinet that if Trump seized Greenland, it would unleash cascading consequences for NATO.
For me, it's important that the Greenlanders know, and they know this by the deeds, not only by the words, that we respect the wishes of the Greenlanders and their interests, and that they can count on us.
In Greenland's capital, locals remain alarmed. I can't understand why he keeps wanting to take us. That's a childish thing, says this resident. Greenlanders seem to understand that they may have to give in to some of Trump's demands to get him to back down from a full-on land grab. And so they vow to keep on talking to Washington while preparing for what happens if Trump can't be swayed. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
The Trump administration has indefinitely suspended the processing of immigrant visas for people from 75 countries, from Brazil to Colombia to Egypt, Lebanon, and Jamaica. It is the most expansive effort yet to restrict legal pathways to enter the U.S. It targets applicants officials believe may rely on government benefits. The State Department posted the freeze will remain active until the U.S. can ensure that new immigrants will not extract wealth from the American people. Tens of thousands of dollars have been donated to a Ford auto worker who was suspended after heckling President Trump when he toured the plant yesterday. The man shouted pedophile protector at Trump, who then appeared to give him the middle finger and shout an obscenity. The worker has been identified as TJ Sabula, who says he seized an opportunity and has no regrets. The union confirms he's been suspended without pay. The White House calls him a lunatic and defends Trump's actions as appropriate. A GoFundMe campaign for Sabula has raised more than $350,000. The company that owns luxury retailer Saks Fifth Avenue has filed for bankruptcy in the U.S. The retailer also owns Neiman Marcus and Bergdorf Goodman. It's one of the largest retail collapses since the pandemic. The company says it secured financing that will keep its stores open while the bankruptcy procedure plays out. In 2013, Saks was acquired by the now-defunct Hudson's Bay Company, which later spun off the three U.S. luxury brands under the Saks Global umbrella. Tragedy strikes Thailand. Coming up, the deadly consequences of a construction crane collapse. Plus, the newly released footage getting past Iran's internet blackout. In Iran, a communications blackout is now into its 7th day. The regime cut phone and internet service to try to limit international scrutiny of its deadly crackdown on mass protests. One human rights group says it has verified the deaths of more than 2,400 protesters. Other groups put the number much higher. The American President Donald Trump has said today he has been told those killings have now stopped and those detained will not be executed. Though, as Redmond Shannon reports, confirming anything from inside Iran is exceedingly difficult.
More footage of the aftermath of the government crackdown emerges from Iran, bypassing the internet blackout. This video, first posted on Sunday, shows grieving families of protesters promising to avenge their deaths.
Family members are having to root through these bodies to identify their children or loved ones. It's mind-blowing.
Iranian-Canadian human rights advocate Nazanin Afshinjam spoke with some people inside Iran Wednesday. She says protests are continuing despite the thousands believed to be killed.
We've reached the stage where we need intervention, and the Iranian people are asking for intervention.
US President Donald Trump had threatened an intervention in Iran to protect protesters. And then on Tuesday, he suggested executions of those arrested would be a red line. 26-year-old protester Irfan Soltani was scheduled to be executed Wednesday, with Iran's Chief Justice saying the trials of others would be done quickly. The US later pulled some staff from its Al Udeid airbase in Qatar, suggesting a military action may have been imminent. That was until...
That's just gotten to me, some information that the killing has stopped, that the executions have stopped. They're not going to have an execution.
Trump claiming an apparent climb down from Iran. A diplomatic game of chicken is likely less than what some Iranian activists wanted to see. If the killings in Iran do stop, the protests are likely to continue and even grow. But if more Iranians are killed, it may prove difficult for Trump not to act. Donna?
Redmond Shannon in London. Thanks, Redmond. At least 32 people have been killed and dozens more injured in northeastern Thailand after a crane collapsed on a passenger train. Rescuers pulled survivors from the damaged and derailed train cars. Construction crews were working on a high-speed rail project that will link Bangkok with the Chinese rail network through Laos when the crane collapsed onto a passing train. Ahead, a BC court case that could have implications for press freedom in this country. The BC government is ending its experiment with drug decriminalization. The 3-year pilot program removed criminal penalties for the possession of small amounts of illicit drugs. The goal was to reduce the stigma around drug use and encourage people to seek help, but it quickly became controversial as it effectively allowed people to use drugs in public. The pilot program ends on January 31st, and the province says it will not ask the federal government to extend it. A trial is underway in BC's Supreme Court that could have implications for press freedom in Canada. It centers on the arrest by the RCMP of photojournalist Amber Bracken while she was covering protests on the Wet'suwet'en territory and whether officers overstepped their authority. As Neethu Garcha reports, the outcome could help define the rights of journalists to report from inside police exclusion zones.
Freelance photojournalist Amber Bracken walks into British Columbia Supreme Court in Vancouver as the trial begins over her November 2021 arrest. She and online news outlet The Narwhal are suing the RCMP and the Attorney General of Canada, alleging officers overstepped their authority.
I was wrongfully arrested and detained and held for 3 days.
It happened while she was in an area under a court injunction known as the Tiny House, where journalists and others had been told to leave. Lawyers for the plaintiff say Bracken was clearly identified as a journalist but was still detained for 3 days without charges. Bracken's lawyer argues it constitutes a charter violation.
Freedom of the press. There's an interference with the press interest here, and the press is essential for democracy. And so that is the part of the claim that may be an interesting precedent.
The RCMP telling Global News Wednesday it maintains its position. The members involved acted lawfully, in good faith, and in the public interest. In an official court response in October of last year, the BC Attorney General said the charter does not provide an automatic blanket exemption or immunity for journalists from the effect of court orders.
I'm not the first journalist to be interfered with, detained, arrested and even charged in Canada, and quite specifically in relation to land-based occupation and Indigenous issues.
It's not about a pipeline. It's about our rights as Indigenous people.
At the site where hereditary chiefs and others were expressing opposition to the pipeline project, police were enforcing the court injunction.
We say that her role as a journalist made her fundamentally different.
He argues the case is about ensuring journalists can report without fear or arbitrary detention. The trial is expected to run for several weeks. Neethu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
No PJs on the plane next. Will we ever return to the golden age of travel? Between frequent delays, shrinking seat sizes, unruly passengers, and bad food, it's been a long time since air travel could be described as glamorous. The U.S. Transportation Secretary has come up with a simple solution. He says if passengers dress better, they'd behave better. As Heather Urix-West reports, actual passengers say the problems have nothing to do with what they wear.
Let's bring civility and manners back.
It was a campaign that raised eyebrows heading into the holiday travel rush. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy calling on airline travelers to remember their civility and ditch their airport PJs to bring a golden age of travel back.
I think I'm well behaved already. Yeah. I don't think changing my outfit's gonna do anything.
I don't think people being uncomfortable dressing up like super nice and being super hot in an airport is gonna make them be nicer people. Like, I'm wearing pajama pants and I'm gonna be fantastic today.
Stop! Videos of bad behavior on flights are easily found on social media, but in Canada, reports of disruptive airplane passengers are actually trending down, with 116 incidents logged in 2025, down from a 5-year peak in 2022. But the push to maximize profits by airlines can be a source of frustration as well.
On my flight up here, I barely enough room to put my legs into the actual seat.
Were you on a WestJet flight?
I was on a WestJet flight.
Dad, could you just straighten out your legs there?
Impossible.
A recent move by WestJet to add an extra row of seating to some of its planes has been seen by many as crossing a line.
That pushes the envelope. That pushes the exasperation envelope. That pushes the frustration envelope. And that pushes people's nerves maybe a little too far.
WestJet's cramped seat configurations have sparked such a backlash that the company has sped up its review into the policy change. And a decision on the company's plans moving forward could come as soon as this week. Pajama-clad, cramped and expensive. The not-so-golden modern age of air travel is what we have now. Heather Urix-West, Global News, Calgary.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Air Canada is the Spruce Beach Rock in Elliott Lake, Ontario. Thanks for watching and hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.